Last week, Malaysia's former Prime Minister, Najib Razak, went on trial over one of the biggest corruption scandals the world has ever seen. The media shorthand for the case is 1MDB. It involves a sovereign wealth fund by the same name that Najib set up. It lost billions, almost $700 million of which is alleged to have ended up in his own bank account. The Malaysian media are all over the story, but it wasn't always that way. Under Najib's government, there were clear red lines that reporters and the news outlets they work for feared to cross. And if not for a British journalist running a website out of London, one business newspaper in Kuala Lumpur, and a secret meeting that took place in Singapore, Malaysians might not know about any of this. The Listening Post's Flo Phillips now with the media backstory behind the 1MDB scandal.
Big news is the upcoming trial of the former Prime Minister Datuk Sri Najib Razak.
Indeed to all 7 charges, but his court appearance...
This trial and all the media attention around it was probably the last thing Najib Razak wanted. 3 years ago, when he was still in power, he tried to throw the media off the scent, publicly requesting that all investigation into the 1MDB scandal be left to him.
Rather than conduct a trial by media, we must wait for the outcome of these investigations.
I don't think that there is a, trial by the media.
There's no such thing as a trial by media.
There's also no trial by the public. I think it's an exaggerated charge.
How can you have the biggest trial ever in Malaysian history subjected to a sort of privacy order?
Good afternoon, Dato' Zuri.
It's ridiculous to stop the media from covering the world's biggest case of kleptocracy.
This case is a global corruption scandal involving the State Development Fund Najib himself set up in 2009, One Malaysia Development Berhad, 1MDB. Under his watch, the fund lost $4.5 billion through shell companies and opaque transactions now being investigated across 12 countries. $681 million of that, according to US prosecutors, has been found in Najib's personal bank account.
If any wrongdoing is found, I can assure you that appropriate action will be taken against those responsible.
3 years later, it turns out Najib was the one responsible. Public anger against him and his party thrust a newly united opposition into power.
Certain heads must fall.
And today, Najib is facing more than 40 charges of money laundering, bribery and abuse of power. And the media, both foreign and domestic, are out in force.
The media in Malaysia were prevented from reporting on it, and laws were in fact used to crack down on the media that reported or wanted to report on 1MDB. So when the former Prime Minister is facing this trial, in a way it is politically significant for the media that in the past was controlled, could actually be seeing a new dawn and one that has a lot more open to report on high-profile cases and also political issues.
Despite the measures Najib took to stifle reporting into 1MDB's suspicious dealings, the scandal was eventually broken by the media. The first investigative piece was published in 2013 by an online business portal called Kinabiz, now defunct, examining whether 1MDB was in fact a giant Ponzi scheme. Then the story was picked up by 2 outlets in particular, a London-based blog, The Sarawak Report, founded by journalist Claire Rucastle-Brown, and a Kuala Lumpur-based business paper, The Edge, that just wouldn't let the story go.
We started doing a lot of stories, asking a lot of questions about what has happened at 1MDB. So this was going on throughout 2014. We came together in January or February of 2015 when we connected with Claire.
I constructed a deal whereby The Edge obtained the material from Xavier Justo, who was a former director of the first joint venture partner with 1MDB. It was an extraordinary cache of documents and information exposing an extraordinary crime. Malaysia Kini, The Edge, Free Malaysia, these outfits did a terrific job in disseminating what they could on 1MDB. but they couldn't write about it in the way that I did because they were in a jurisdiction that was controlled by Najib.
And that's crucial to how the rest of the story unfolded. The Sarawak report continued its investigations from London, protected from the reaches of Malaysian law. For Ho Kay Tat, publisher of The Edge, as well as some of his colleagues, it was a different story.
We were under a lot of pressure. I mean, you are writing a big expose on a big financial scandal in a government-owned company, a company that was started by the Prime Minister at that time, Najib. So it was unprecedented. It was not an easy environment to work under. And we always knew that the media laws are such that the government can shut us down anytime, which they did eventually.
The Edge was shut down. Its sister site, The Malaysian Insider, was blocked, along with two others, Asia Sentinel and Medium. And journalists at the news site Malaysia Kini were arrested, all for trying to cover 1MDB. Their coverage highlighted something many Malaysians already knew, that the country's media landscape had a split running right through it. While online publishers were leading the journalistic charge, mainstream news outlets, particularly those with close ties to the government, were either unwilling or unable to touch the story. Zaini Hassan was deputy editor of Utusan Malaysia, a government-affiliated newspaper. The close relationship between his paper and power meant certain red lines could not be crossed. 1MDB was one of them.
I think it came as no surprise that there were not much coverage. They were clearly controlled through the polity of fear. On top of that, many laws also used to control, or if I may use the word, to shackle, the freedoms of the media.
And that was corresponded by what we saw as a rise in the number of cases of individuals, whether you're journalists, you're bloggers, you're activists, who came under the Communications and Multimedia Act. So they were investigated, they were arrested and also charged under the law. The Communications and Multimedia Act was very actively used.
And not only did he fall back on the existing very oppressive legislation in terms of the multimedia acts that existed, he sought to add one of the world's first formal fake news acts. The Anti-Fake News Act was a direct attempt at intimidating the population at large. And it was a direct attempt at bringing the same controls over individual social media that this regime had exercised for decades over the mainstream press. This new law was Najib's belated attempt to silence the discussion on 1MDB.
The Anti-Fake News Act, like Najib's time left in office, was to be short-lived. A few months after Najib's successor, Mahathir Mohamad, took over, he did away with the law. In an ironic twist, however, Najib has, over the past year, launched a fully-fledged campaign to try and rebrand himself, as well as paint his trial as a politicized vendetta, all on social media. But the Malaysian media aren't falling for it. Not even those who were once part of the mainstream. They say they've learnt their lesson.
I left Utusan in November last year, and then we set up a news portal where I believe in these freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expressions and so on. It's a milestone to the Malaysian journalism. Don't do the same mistake again. And I think this is a good opening for the Malaysian media. And I hope that we maintain with these freedoms, we maintain with this integrity, we maintain with this transparency.
1MDB is no longer taboo. All the media companies, they're giving it full maximum coverage. It's a topic that the public wants to know. It's an important story, and they now have the freedom to report it. So, yeah, it's a field day actually for the media to report on 1MDB now.
6 years ago, Malaysian media broke the story of the 1MDB scandal. Najib Razak pushed back.
Rather than conduct a trial by media, we must wait for the outcome of these investigations.
Now, as he stands trial for one of the world's biggest cases of kleptocracy, the media Najib tried to silence are all over it. They, and the law, have caught up with him.